rejected the count and sent it back to the states for the review to do a recount. Well, that's kind of what President Donald Trump wanted Mike Pence to do. With a lot of pressure on him to do just that. But Kevin, clearly Mike Pence disagreed with Donald Trump, and it seems a lot of others did as well.
Yeah, and the big question is whether or not it all amounts to a crime or not. The committee members certainly seem to make it clear they believe it amounts to a crime and that Trump broke the law in his effort to make former Vice President Mike Pence single-handedly overturn the election. This is what committee member Liz Cheney said. She said, what the president wanted the vice president to do was not just wrong, it was illegal and unconstitutional. But were they able to put the evidence forward that showed that this was illegal, Tom? I don't know if they did that. I think they clearly showed that Donald Trump put an enormous amount of pressure on Mike Pence. And joining us now is Roshini debriefs, political consultant who joins us frequently on the show. Good morning, Roshini. How are you?
Good morning, Kevin and Tom.
So we're talking about, it seems like the committee members made it clear that they believe this is a crime. As you watch this play out, do you think that the evidence on its own appears that this was a crime, what Donald Trump did to pressure Mike Pence, and you're an attorney as well, or do you feel that they're pushing this agenda very hard?
You know, first and foremost, they are pushing the agenda very hard. I mean, as we've talked about before, it really doesn't matter that this is a bipartisan panel running the hearings. It's not a court of law, and it doesn't exactly follow rules of evidence. However, it's hard not to think about what would be right in a court of law and what would be preposterous. So that's really hard for me to take those lenses off of this. They are pushing a narrative. They're pushing their agenda. And we're not hearing from some of the key people right there in their own words, right? And I know they had various witness testimony and things like that, transcripts of testimony, but we have to be very careful that we don't take it in as if it is a court of law. And I also understand that the Justice Department is a little ticked at the committee because they're not sharing materials with the Justice Department, which would be the body that would bring any kind of charges. And then we get into something I talked about with you guys last week. Do we want charges pressed against a former president of the United States? That sets up a whole other layer of optics and really a rough ride for our country.
So as this was presented, or as it's being presented, how do you think Mike Pence held up as all of this was going on around him? The pressure from the president, his interpretation of the Constitution, him making this critical decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think he held up really well. I mean, remembering it playing out in real time, knowing that he was getting attacked, knowing he had fallen out of favor with the president at the time as things were happening. I think he did what he could do with the information he had and his own understanding. I mean, I think you go into an office like that, and not that many people have been the vice president of the United States, but you go into an office like that, having hopefully read the Constitution, trying to understand the article in the Constitution that covers the president and the vice president. And I believe he was trying to prevent some kind of constitutional breakup in our country by doing what he did.
Yeah. The witnesses we heard yesterday, the attorney Greg Jacob and the judge, Michael Ludwig, Liz Cheney trying to show seemingly that the ultimate goal of these proceedings was that what Donald Trump was doing was unconstitutional and it was illegal. Do these claims of pressure against Mike Pence, I mean, we saw it at the time. It was very public and also private as well. But the pressure put against Mike Pence to overturn the electoral votes, does that rise to the level, in your view, of either one of those two, that it was unconstitutional or that it was illegal?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, Tom, because it's an interesting kind of fine line. You would think that anything that's unconstitutional is also illegal.
Right.
The thing is, whoever the charging body is has the decision, has great power to make those kinds of decisions. Something can seem at its surface unconstitutional, but charges may not end up arising out of that, because I think you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. We also didn't see anybody at the time. Now, he'd already been voted out of office on January 6th, but we also didn't see anyone at the time fully using the 25th Amendment and bringing that up, right? Even if there had been talk of it. So, I mean, that's kind of where the constitutional piece of this gets a little murky. I'm definitely not a constitutional lawyer, but that is, in the time, here we are a year and a half later, or I guess whatever, a yearish later, we can't necessarily put that 2020 lens on it. No pun intended on 2020. January 6th, 2020
Right.
is when the things happened. You have to somehow jump back in time. What was happening then? Who was doing, saying what? We know a lot more now than we knew then. It is unfair for anybody to be judged by any, facts of the following 17 months.
This committee, the legalities they're bringing forth, or trying to at least, the evidence. The committee chair, Benny Thompson, he has said the objective is not to dig up evidence to give to the Department of Justice. But Vice Chair Liz Cheney has said otherwise, suggesting she would like the DOJ to investigate. And now we learn the DOJ itself is complaining that the committee has not yet shared enough information, and it's hampering the Justice Department's investigation. So is the DOJ now, do you think, looking at criminal charges they're investigating right now against the former president?
It's a very interesting foreshadowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is what is very, I don't want to say scary, because I'm not making kind of a subjective judgment on this about what I think should happen. But in general, we have to look at, and this is where when these people are put in the positions of nationwide office or congressional or Senate offices, they're holding the public trust in their hands. They're also holding the viability of our country in their hands. So this isn't just some petty, pocket crime that's happened, if indeed a crime is determined here. So we have to really, really think about what you're doing and what kind of resources are you putting into something. And are you creating more of a witch hunt, or are you really trying to uphold something? And no one has really shown me that they're doing anything but political bantering, especially with Tom, as you pointed out. Both Cheney and Thompson don't seem to be on the same page, and they're both on the committee.
Pence's legal aides testified that they repeatedly told Donald Trump and his team that his plan to get the vice president to block the election was unconstitutional. Do you see any of the information that was given to Trump in advance as any kind of evidence in a potential charge of conspiracy to obstruct a proceeding?
Well, that is a hard one, because we don't have the actual words of Donald Trump. What were you believing at the time? What did you say back to them when they told you that? Did you bring in your constitutional law expert? Did you grab a federal judge and say, "Hey, we need you to give us some legal guidance on this," over there in Donald Trump's camp? So it's one of those things, and you've heard that saying, right? I serve at the will of the president, and that's why there are times when secretaries of different departments will resign just because they fell out of favor of a president. So I don't know how much weight the aides of Pence saying that to Trump could actually hold up in a court of law, a real court of law, without truly knowing what Trump said back and what kind of advice Trump was getting individually and separately from Pence's aides.
Yeah. Well, we're going to keep watching this. We always appreciate your perspective. It's insightful. Roshini Rajkumar joining us. Thanks, Roshini. Great to talk with you again.
Thanks, guys.